Hello everyone, and it's lovely to be here on Thursday in South Africa. It's actually a public holiday. It's what we call Heritage Day, and we celebrate our I just want to check the lighting here. We celebrate our heritage, but it's also the fun name for it is also called National Braai or Barbecue Day, depending on where in the world you might be watching this from. And I know it's lunchtime, so I suspect that many of you will catch up on this particular video on replay, so I'll be speaking to myself. So today I want to talk about the one kind of client that I think every coach needs to have in their whole client mix. And I've had quite a lot of time to think about this particular topic because I've spent the last 3 weeks, my mum has been in hospital in ICU, and this Saturday just gone, she finally passed away. But during that period, I spent a lot of time in the hospital despite the coronavirus restrictions. In fact, I eventually got to the point where they just gave up on me insisting on spending time with my mom and using every trick in the book, and they actually gave me the code to get into the ICU so that they weren't having to come and answer the door all the time to let me in. So what is this particular client? Well, before I go any further, I am currently running a 100-day challenge in my private group, the Marketing and Sales Academy for Coaches. And we are looking at making small incremental changes every day that together will all kind of come together and give you a boost in terms of accelerating your marketing and sales. So it's all around we will end round about the middle of December, and this 100-day challenge, hopefully when you are ready to take a little bit of a break for yourself over the festive season, you will be doing so going out on a high and ready to start the new year 2021 on a completely different note, because I know that this year has been difficult for some of us. And again, that brings me back to the topic, but before I go any further, let me quickly do the housekeeping and introduce myself. My name is Megan Hudson, and I am a business and marketing coach. I specialize in helping coaches find and define your niche, pardon me, and also accelerating your marketing and sales. And in fact, it was so much fun. Earlier this week, somebody connected with me via Facebook, and they described themselves as a cynophilist and a dendrophile, and I had to check the dictionary just to make sure that I understood the words, and they described me to a T, because a cynophilist is a dog lover, which I am, and a dendrophile is a tree lover, which I am as well. And I very often describe myself as a dog-loving, tree-hugging business and marketing coach. So I would, in other terms, call myself a cynophilitic, dendrophilic business and marketing coach, but I'm rambling on. Okay, so the kind of client that you need to make sure or focus on getting into your client mix. One of the industries that has not ground to a halt during the global pandemic has been the medical industry. And I mean the medical industry at large. Now, if it's true that as we speak, the next version of the coronavirus is actually busy starting to create itself. And remember, we've had, prior to COVID-19, we had the MERS virus, then the SARS virus, now COVID-19. These are all coronaviruses. They all fall into the same category. And as yet, there is no vaccination or cure for anything that is termed a coronavirus. And if you listen to the likes of Bill Gates, who's working with, I forget which medical foundation, but a very knowledgeable and well-resourced medical foundation, people like Bill Gates and futurists are saying that every 5 to 10 years, we can expect to be hit by yet another coronavirus type global pandemic, that the sort of these health scares and shutdowns are going to become quite the norm and quite the way of life. That being said, we have a responsibility in terms of future-proofing our coaching businesses to diversify to a point the kinds of clients that we work with. So let me take a friend of mine who has ended up where most of her clients fall into the heavy trucking industry. And somebody like her, well, heavy trucks, big trucks are used to transport masses of supplies at times like this, when there is huge demand for medical supplies, etc., etc. So she could diversify to start working with the logistics and warehousing kind of divisions of pharmaceutical companies or companies that are supplying equipment into hospitals, and make sure that she has got that kind of a client on her books. You know, the other day, one of my dogs has developed a bit of a limp. And so I thought, we've got a particular vet that we like to take our dogs to. He is a specialist veterinary physician. So he's not only done the normal, I think, 7 years of veterinary science, but he's then gone and done another 8 additional years to become the equivalent of a human specialist physician, but he does dogs. On top of that, he has done human homeopathy because he likes to treat homeopathically or supplement normal, allopathic medicines with homeopathic medication where he can. And on top of that, he's done another 3 years doing human acupuncture, which he has translated to be able to use with animals. So he is a specialist's specialist. Now, I can tell you something. His business has not suffered one bit, because do you know, and I phoned about 2 weeks ago to make this appointment, the earliest that I could get an appointment was the 8th of October. And I've even asked that if there are any cancellations, that they phone me and invite me to, you know, so that I can have one of the earlier cancellations. And I've been checking on a regular basis to see whether or not they have had any cancellations, and they haven't. So my point is that here is someone who is an absolute specialist, irreplaceable. There are, I think, only 2 specialists, or there were at one point only 2 specialist veterinary physicians in South Africa. And he's one of the people who has actually, through our veterinary training school, trained other people to become specialist veterinary physicians. His business has not been remotely impacted or affected by the coronavirus. So there is a real argument to make for specialization. But he is in even though it's veterinary, he's in a medical field. So people, despite pandemics that are shutting other industries down, people will never not need medical related help. Even though, I mean, I know that we took my mom to see her cardiologist a few months before she passed away, and he said that his business had, gone down by about 40%. So the medical specialists were definitely affected. People were definitely staying away from hospitals and not, having unnecessary appointments. But the fact of the matter is that the medical industry in these global pandemics, it continues to run. They are essential frontline workers. And so there will always be a need for their services. And in all the time that I was spending at my mum's bedside, I was looking around at what was, going on around me and what was happening. So there are companies that deal with collecting and disposing of medical waste. That's a potential client. There are companies that come and collect the hospital linen and take it away and wash it. That's another potential related client because they would not be affected and wouldn't close down. Medical aids had to keep on running, even though they had to, initially I think the call center staff definitely were working from home, and possibly the senior management may still be doing so, but the medical aids. And these are all kind of related industries that are under extraordinary pressure because of the kinds of situations that they are having to deal with, and the volumes that they are all of a sudden that a global pandemic places on them. Catering, my foster sister is a qualified chef. My advice to her is absolutely, unfortunately her company closed down, but absolutely find a job with a company that does catering for hospitals, because you just are not going to be out of a job. I know that, these people are at additional risk during this particular time, but provided you take the reasonable precautions, these kinds of industries and related industries do not close down. There's an increased demand for medical supplies and specialist medical equipment. So companies that supply these kinds of things. The pharmaceutical companies, I know, for example, that certain people who tested positive for the coronavirus were being treated with vitamin C, zinc, and vitamin D. So the nutraceutical manufacturing companies, the companies that were manufacturing vitamin C, couldn't make it fast enough to supply the market. So I can remember a certain stage trying to get some vitamin C supplements from our local pharmacy, and the shelves were bare. So it's only now that production has started to, catch up with these. And behind the scenes, the stresses that are going on in these manufacturing companies is that they are having to expedite bringing in, raw materials or finding the raw materials and ingredients for these medications. The people in the senior positions, they're the workers in these allied industries, are under just as much additional pressure as the people in the hospitals and direct healthcare industries. So there are also agencies that supply nursing staff to hospitals. And I know from speaking to some of the nurses in the hospital where my mum was, that at the beginning, you know, they had mass resignations because of the coronavirus. So, you know, where there were nurses who or staff who were petrified of contracting the virus, and so they resigned en masse, and that just put this additional load onto the remaining staff, and also meant that the hospital had to turn to these agencies, these outsourced agencies, to supply this increased demand. So it just and the other thing that I was also watching happen was the staff, the nurses in the ICU were having to deal with patients who, so they come into something like the ICU and you already are very sick. You're already not in your best state of mind, and you're already probably not at your most polite, to put it mildly. And I can remember the one day watching this one patient verbally abusing, swearing, effing and blinding, but verbally badly abusing some of the nurses. And I get that the place that he was coming from was a place of deep-rooted fear and frustration. He'd been there for quite a while. But these nurses are on the receiving end. Not only are they having to obey all of these different government regulations, they're having to run the gamut of family and loved ones who are frustrated because they can't get in and are not being allowed to see their people who are in hospital. So the nurses are having this extra responsibility of, explaining what is going on, learning to communicate in a different way, remember, because they're no longer able to communicate face to face in person with the loved ones of their patients. Now they have this, fairly difficult communication via telephone, and making sure that they are, putting the loved ones' fears at ease, and the same thing with the doctors. They're having to deal with these patients who are so ill, they're grumpy, they're not at their best, they are getting verbally abused, and just probably getting verbally abused from both ends, from the patients and from their families. And just everybody is on a knife's edge because of this extra level of tension and fear that they're having to deal with. I remember, so I really was insistent on seeing my mother, and I worked the system, and I used every means at my disposal to be able to get in and have visits. And I can remember it got to a point where the manager of the ICU, I think he'd become so frustrated with me, and he was so annoyed every time he saw me that probably I would create a bit of a health problem for him in terms of making his blood pressure rise and so on. And there was one visit that I remember clearly that he just wouldn't even meet my eyes so that I could greet him. And so I created an enormous amount of stress with my insistence on spending time with my mom for the staff. And also I acknowledge that I was a risk, because even though I was being scanned every time I went in, I still was somebody, a member of the public, who could have been exposed unknowingly and could have been carrying the virus. So I'm just trying to paint a picture of this industry that, if we are going to have to face a future of global pandemics, of global shutdowns of society and health and so on, there is one industry that does not stop. there's one industry that never sleeps, and they are the people in these industries and their related industries. These pandemics put them under pressures that actually they're not trained and not supported to withstand. So much so that you have like the mass resignations that I was talking about. So I really want you to think in terms of your current client mix, and in terms of the kinds of clients that you perhaps strategically look at pursuing and adding into your mix. I want you to think about the strategy of looking at the broader medical profession and professions that support the medical profession, because they are the one profession, they are the one kind of category that just isn't negatively impacted by these things like a global pandemic. They, in fact, are in the front line and have to deal with untold levels of stress. They have to build unbelievable levels of resilience. They every day are going to work facing this fear that it might be the day that they are exposed to the virus. And as coaches, we can help them to some extent deal with what they are having to face on a day-to-day basis. So I hope that that's been a practical idea, and I look forward to seeing any comments that you might have on what I've had to say. Please do hop on over to my Facebook group, the Marketing and Sales Academy for Coaches, and join the 100-Day Challenge if you want to end the year on a really, really strong note. As I say, every single day there's just a small little thing, task or suggestion that I make that you can, just up level what you are doing to just a different, slightly different notch into a slightly different level. Because I know that this year has been an incredibly difficult year for so many of us, and we need to look at practical things that we can do to make sure that we don't look back on 2020 as the year that we were forced to close down our coaching practice or forced to stop following our dreams. So please do join me for the 100-Day Challenge, and thank you for popping on or watching later on replay. Ciao for now.